Honor, a long acclaimed trait of East Asian society, tied in with ideals of Confucianism, Zen Buddhism, and native animistic beliefs like Shintoism. Honor is something that is still a background effect, something constant, an element to maintain and build upon in one's life, something to protect in the shadow of one's identity, and the undercurrent behind a family name. For those who stand alone, without family or friends or community, it becomes something more individual. Honor is not solely admired in the East. Western ideals of honor, though differing, span the ages throughout history. The Middle East, through religious piety, Europe through strong standing, backing intellectualism and warfare. The United States, through a rags to riches story, using capitalism as the catapult to launch one into a new life, or through the military-industrial complex. Honor is often spoke of, but it seems in our modern world that despite the increasing populace, few have it. At least, that's what some would say. Honor is different for everyone. Some might agree, and some might not. Many think that honor is a hard, rigid, obvious thing. No pun intended. I think it's more nuanced than that. I think it's subjective. But enough about what I think. Let's look at the case. In the case of honor, it is both external as well as internal insight. Honor is how other people perceive you as well as how you perceive yourself. Do not confuse it with self-image. Your personal honor may not extend to those perceiving you. They may find you wicked. But today, we'll be talking about a very specific honor, Bushido, developed between the 11th and 24th centuries, the way of the warrior, the samurai's code of honor and etiquette. Take us to Japan, the Kamakura period around 3 centuries before the Edo period. Shogun run the land, only answering to the emperor himself and surpassing all the rest under the feudal hierarchical class systems. Most people are agrarian farmers, nomads, merchants, or craftsmen, if not at the very least nobility. What is honor? A meld of things, from culture, religion, and society. In feudal Asia, honor could be gained via birth into an honorable family with an honorable station, or it could be gifted to you by someone from a higher rank than you. Honor was often synonymized with loyalty to someone above you, whether that be your parents in the form of filial piety, your religious disciples in the form of monkhood, your employer and lord in the form of shoguns and emperors and the like, or your husband and mother-in-law if you are a new wife. To go against these people and their wishes was an easy way to find dishonor. And dishonor was avoided like the plague, or hidden. Public opinion reigned, and dishonor was enough to invoke suicide and death rather than living with the shame. Honor until death. Dishonor was like an infection that could affect the rest of one's family and their futures. Suicide was seen as a salve to a tarnished reputation. It was seen as the ultimate way to be accountable for one's actions and the ultimate way to take responsibility for embarrassing a unit that you belong to or embarrassing yourself. East Asian societies tended to be more collectivist than individualized Western ones. This still prevails today, as many of these societies remain somewhat homogeneous for such a multicultural, globalized world, and these societies share a history, a culture, and language. Historically, they operated and thought of one another, and the hierarchy they fell on. To stick out was poor taste. In Japan, there is a saying, 出る杭は打たれる, or, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. You can guess much of how things are meant to operate from that phrase alone in those societies. It is not an ideal written in stone and blood, but it's very common and very prevalent in both the ancient and the modern day Japan. The very word samurai means to serve. Samurai positions were often inherited through bureaucrat families, and many of them received material favors from the shogun for their service. Entire households and branches of servants would rely on the reputation and income of these aristocratic families to remain intact for their own survival. It wasn't just an ego trip like some outsiders looking in might assume. It was also tied to their employment. Enter Jin Sakai. Before he became the ghost, Jin was of aristocratic birth. His father was a samurai, one of much acclaim if you glance upon his armor and can take inferences from his life, his estate. His katana is a family blade passed down through his lineage, reserved for nobility. Lord Shimura, from an entirely different clan, essentially adopted Jin and took over his education, his training, and his overall upbringing. He is later captured and becomes the catalyst for Jin's journey. Let me make this clear. Lord Shimura was beyond kind to Jin considering the circumstances, even despite them being blood-tied through Shimura's sister, Jin's mother. He doesn't really owe Jin anything, and he certainly didn't have to take Jin in as a ward, something that they are both aware of, particularly in a society where blood sons are so revered and so important to carry on family traditions, family wealth, and continue on the family name. As we all know, Lord Shimura lost his son, and so in essence, Jin became somewhat of a replacement for this, something they are both aware of. Not only that, but Lord Shimura is extremely high up on the scale of Tsushima, essentially a lord of lords of the entirety of the island. He goes out of his way to give Jin the resources for the best, most honorable life a man of their origins can have, which can also be hinted from some of the jealousy that we get from Jin's old friends as he runs across them in the game. Giving Jin the code and training was giving Jin his purpose back. A goal, a tie to a father, a new one and his old one. Jin feels disconnected from his biological father due to death and shame and overall a new father. Jin felt the love, received it, and refracted it, prepared to die by his uncle's side on the beach of Komoda, as we all saw. You know all of this, but it's important to know Lord Shimura's station, position, and nuances. They are all important for later, and he's the one who truly introduces Jin to honor, after all. Before Shimura, Jin's childhood is murky at best. The player sees Jin's father in a poor light, dying at the feet of an unarmored bandit who slays him from behind, while Lord Sakai pleads his prepubescent, unarmored, untrained son to save him from his fate. Not a terribly honorable ending. Jin's own relationship with honor starts poorly, and when he's young, not just because of his culture, but because he displays the antithesis of honor as a young child. His clan is attacked, and Jin watches his father get slaughtered, unable to respond out of fear and shock when his father reaches out to him, calling for his help. Jin feels shame, and as if he's dishonored himself and his loved ones for not doing what he believed would have been the right thing to do at the time. In Jin's mind, youth and inexperience isn't enough to distance himself from doing nothing to help prevent his father's death. It doesn't matter so much whether he would have actually been able to do something or not. He must live now with the guilt of a survivor, the guilt of seeing his strong image of a father, a patriarch of the family, literally cut down, cutting through the hopes of his future, and the guilt of feeling as though he could have changed the course of his entire life had he acted differently. Perhaps in a life where his father wasn't just the wind at his back. Mongols were not so hung up on honor or limited by its parameters. If you ever get the chance to listen to Dan Carlin's history podcast episodes, Hardcore History, you will soon realize that the Mongols play to win. They could have almost invaded the entirety of Asia, as well as the Middle East and Europe. You're not small fry if you can invade and maintain hold of China for a dynasty. Which is funny, because it's during that very dynasty that the Mongols had China in their hold that they chose to then invade Tsushima. Jin begins to drift from the Bushido code that he was taught in order to defeat the Mongols. He essentially discards Lord Shimura's teachings, and even though he does not do this malevolently or with ill intent, it's still a huge insult to both Shimura and his station, and the samurai as a whole.
We face our enemy head on. When we take their life, we look them in the eye with courage and respect.
Jin knows that every time he strays from the path, he hurts his guardian deeply, despite the lives that he saves. The dishonor is a lot for a man like Shimura to bear, whereas Jin, who has not held such an important station as long, who finds values in his personal morals, can empathize with his uncle but does not undergo the same challenges as him. He is not a lord's lord. For Jin, the people of Tsushima become more important to him than his name, his family's name, or their legacy. The people of Tsushima become more important to him than staying on code and staying in his uncle's good graces when he so desperately wants to prove that the love his uncle dispensed onto him was deserved. As you play the game through Jin, you meet people from all walks of life in Tsushima, leaving the secluded elite samurai class. You meet Ronin, monks, men, women, young and old, even ghosts and gods. You see the motivations for many of them, soon understanding that though they are all not from noble birth or honorable means, that there is still inherent value and potential in all of them. Even some of the antagonists have understandable plights, making the game and its inhabitants that much more human. The death of one of his alliances, who is a mere blacksmith, is one of the most moving in the game. All the gamers realize that this guy had a heart of gold and that he was a good friend and he was very valuable and he was courageous, because even though he was terrified of the Mongols and what they could do to him and his horrific past he's already suffered at the hands of others, being tortured and hurt and flayed and all those kinds of things, he still makes the choice to face them, even though knowing that it could very well be his end, because again, like Jin, he has certain values that he will uphold until the very end. He's another person of honor, but that is a different story for a different day. Because Jin is willing to give up his personal honor, he's able to save the people of Tsushima as a whole and gain a new inherently born, publicly spread honor of being a local hero, a vigilante, a legend. The people of the island now know that the ghost is there for them, that the ghost will do anything for them, and with the ghost at their back like the wind of an ethereal father, they feel invigorated to fight back in the ways that they can for their island, therefore helping to hold off the Mongol horde from the unsuspecting mainland. Despite doing everything against the code, killing sneakily, craftily, moving like a thief in the night, using misdirection instead of loudly announcing himself, mixing and matching separate codes for his own means, Jin is the most honorable person in the game. I say that confidently, and I believe many players will feel the same. It takes a larger toll and strength to give up your personal image and desires and wishes, even your vanity, to do the right thing for the collective, for your fellow man. And Jin did just that. He wouldn't have been wrong to follow the samurai way, but people would have died, and that went against his personal code. And he chose to give up his reputation in order to maintain his personal code and values. You have to know by now, living in this world, that most people don't do that. Everybody knows someone who's sold out in essence. And Jin had a great reason to sell out, a reason he dedicated his whole life to and trained forever for, and yet he still chose the right way in his mind. The most tragic part is that Lord Shimura knows this. He can't say it outright due to the expectations on him and the role he plays in the hierarchy. He can't publicly voice praise to someone going against everything he stands for, everything the samurai stands for. But he is proud of Jin. Immensely. He sees the sacrifice Jin made to gain what he believed was right, and even more than that, Jin did the most honorable thing by sticking with his course. Jin remains honorable because when Jin finally chooses to betray Shimura's teachings, he doesn't do it half-heartedly. He doesn't hem and haw, he doesn't go back on his decision or hesitate or consider joining his uncle when given chance after chance by Shimura in the privacy of pagodas where no one else is around to hear. Jin makes his choice, and he sticks with it. He doesn't apologize for it. He only apologizes for hurting his loved one. In the book The Unfettered Mind, a samurai discourse written by a monk, there is a passage that says, "You must never neglect exertion. You must quickly set your eye on the goal and investigate thoroughly, both coming and going. Thus, should you look straight into things, this means that you should never be careless or negligent in your efforts, and you should constantly come back to yourself. You should quickly fix your eye on the goal and continually investigate these principles in depth. Always go straight ahead, considering what is right to be right and what is wrong to be wrong, while observing this principle in all things." The player does this constantly with Jin, when reciting poems on rocks, learning new songs, pondering in hot springs, or going through old memories. Jin is always thinking on his task. assessing himself, reviewing his actions, his motives, and his course of direction in life. He's not careless with anything he does, not really. He moves with purpose towards his goals. You will receive wisdom without a teacher means that you will acquire this fundamental wisdom without its ever having been transmitted to you by a teacher. But of course, no one teaches Jin what is the right thing to do to defeat the Mongols. No one tells him the right path. Many tell him what he should do or project onto him his duties, but Jin leaves it to himself to decide. Many times in life, we all run into people who feel more than free and entitled to tell us what to do with our lives or our paths or our purposes, where we should be or where we should fit in the cogs of this machine called society. And so many times, people listen to these outsiders and their influences, and they fall into line, hating it every single step of the way. That's why we respect entrepreneurs and path breakers and those who go off the well-treaded path and those who are underdogs, people who everyone thinks will fail, who everyone thinks will do poorly. When they succeed, they evoke a sense in all of us that we feel sympathetic to, as though we can succeed too. All it takes is some willpower and grace. And this isn't easy for Jin, of course. He has several problems he has to overcome, I think in the beginning, Jin isn't just ashamed that he did nothing to help his dad. I think Jin is also ashamed of being ashamed of how his father was killed. His father is unmanned, unguarded, and even in the greatest armor on his own land with his own clan, his dad sees death before him and cowers in the way that only a child can. And I don't fault Lord Sakai for that. Anyone is going to go stiff and lose resolve at the sense that defeat and death is imminent, but Jin was taught that his father was the epitome of masculinity, a lord, a hero, a samurai, and he died in the most pitiful way. I think Jin was ashamed for feeling poorly about his father, especially when he himself did nothing to help his father. This is not something that is ever said in the game. It's just a guess on my part. Jin is later introduced to Shimura as a guardian, and as Jin's grief fades, he sees the man Shimura is and decides that that is the kind of man he wants to be. He wants to be like his uncle, proud and strong. Deep down, he doesn't want to be like his father or end up like him. He wants to accept a situation like that with grace. And his belief in Shimura's honor is proven as Shimura almost dies several times and never once shows weakness. He wants to be like his uncle, but he can't if he's going to save the people of Tsushima. They're outmatched, outnumbered, and if they do it their way, everyone would fall and suffer the indignities that the Mongols reserved specifically for their Japanese war prisoners. Jin cares about people too much to continue to pursue his dream when he realizes victory is going to require the ghost. Not Jin Sakai, not Lord Jin Sakai, and not Samurai Jin Sakai. Jin becomes the ghost because he's brave enough to kill the old version of him, the child, the young man that desperately wants and needs the guidance of a father, a code to follow, a station to uphold, because in the end, Jin has no grand home or servants, only a shack in the woods. He has no lady of nobility, only a bond with a low-class thief with a heart of gold. He has no children to continue his already socially wrecked line, no trophies, no gold. But what he has outweighs all of it. The safety of the people give him peace. The persona of the ghost makes him legend. And he is able, through saving Tsushima, to undo what he feels is his old mistake from childhood by doing nothing and letting another die. In his certainty and surety, Jin still oddly maintains the Bushido code while disrespecting it. I think Jin knows that deep down, even if he were to revert in his path, that his uncle would still not be able to grant him back the honor that he's already lost. His uncle respects him more in the end for remaining on his own path and principles instead of wheedling back and forth between the two. The ultimate respect and honor is gained through the killing of Jin's uncle, as well as the ultimate tragedy, masterfully told by the game developers and creators and writers. To maintain honor for them both, his uncle and himself, Jin must kill him. To spare his uncle is the greatest dishonor and insult that he could give. His uncle is a man of honor, and deserves a battle of honor, a death of honor, to deny him that, even out of the deepest love, is to hurt him irreparably. Both endings are wonderfully done, and though left up to the player, both make sense and both are strong for the story. Leave your uncle alive, and though he is certain you love him, you fail him to the deepest aspect of the code, not allowing him an honorable death after defeat by a renegade, the antithesis of his teachings and what he stands for. He can't help his rage, nor will his honor allow him to stop it, or stop him from promising a commitment to hunt you until death.
I have no honor, but I will not kill my family. The ghost will be hunted for the rest of his days. I know.
You can kill him, but Jin's heart is torn at the last strands that were holding on after losing his parents, and he is left utterly alone, a remnant of his former self, a true ghost. Still, his uncle is proud until the end, accepting death with grace and happy when it mattered. Jin was able to follow the code in one aspect that would honor him the most. You can prove yourself to your uncle in the worst way, or you can love him in the worst way. Jin is the most honorable in this game because in a position where most would rescind their decision or fall back due to the opinion of those that matter to us, those in society, even our enemies, Jin steps forward with courage and decision. Like a man, Jin owns his actions to defend his own moral code for the good of the collective. Like his father was a ghost at his back, he is the ghost that guides and pushes Tsushima into a brighter dawn. And like the ghost, you can practice Jin's methods of honor by analyzing your goals, your motives, your purpose. You have to find a cause or a drive that moves you forward with a sureness that no one can deter from you. I will end with this quote. By name, I call it Taia. Taia is the name of an ancient Chinese sword that has no equal under heaven. This famous jeweled sword can freely cut anything, from rigid metal and tempered steel to dense and hardened gems and stones. Under heaven, there is nothing that can parry this blade. The person who obtains this uncreated mysterious ability will not be swayed by the commander of huge armies or an enemy force of hundreds and thousands. This is the same as there being nothing that can impede the blade of this famous sword. Thus, I call strength of this mysterious ability the sword Taia. All men are equipped with this sharp sword Taia, and in each one it is perfectly complete. This means that the famous sword Taia, which no blade under heaven can parry, is not imparted just to other men. Everyone, without exception, is equipped with it. It is inadequate for no one, and it is perfectly entire. Your will. You have Taia. I equate the sword Taia with will. Now, the book may be intending for Taia to be a certain technique, a certain literal sword, an old story, a metaphor for something else, but I'm equating Taia to will. Your will. You have Taia. You have purpose. You just have to be brave enough to reach out and grab it. Consequences be damned. So, tell me what you think. I plan to read a lot more samurai literature and make a more extended video in the future on honor, samurai, Jin, and masculinity, but feel free to share any reactions, thoughts, or ideas down below. Thanks.